Thanks for joining me, everyone. Charles Moskowitz. And my guest is Matt Robinson. Matt is an author of a new book that's just out, Lions, Tigers, and Bulldogs. Talks about lore and stories of the great Ivy League colleges of the United States, which, of course, go all the way back to colonial times. And Matt, thanks for joining me today.
Thanks, Charles. Honored to be here.
So, Matt, first of all, you're an English major, is that right?
English major at Penn, English teacher and writer for quite some time, yeah.
Okay, can you talk a little bit about the writing process, how you got into this, and how you actually put it together?
Well, as far as being a writer, career-wise, I'd worked in radio in Boston for a while when I was in college, like internships. And when I graduated, I couldn't, the stations I was at had just been sold to major corporations, and all the people I knew got scattered to the winds. So I started I was a paralegal, actually, because my father and grandfather both been lawyers. And I just started writing about music, going out to concerts at night, and it really caught on. Eventually, I was in the Globe, the Boston Globe, and then I went on to Billboard magazine for a few years. And then just due to diversity of interest, I started writing about more than music. I now do food on WBZ radio here in Boston, and I've done travel pieces, and I've also taught English. I've written about education for a while. And the book ideas had always been on the computer, back of my mind, but always had been backburnered when a new paid gig came in. But unfortunately, about 7 years ago, my dad was diagnosed with dementia, and I kind of promised him that one of the books would see the light of day, and that was really kind of put the fire to my feet to publish this particular book.
And I think that in this day and age, with the internet being what it is, and Google, and you get access in a nonfiction to archives of colleges for very little bit of money. You can actually go in and get primary source material if you want to write a history, or if you want to go deep into any topic. Then I think that a lot of people can write books now, and they don't really realize it. I mean, it's something that all you need is a laptop.
Right.
And you can, if you don't have a publisher, you can self-publish, and then sometimes your books get picked up by publishers. I mean, that's happened with me twice. And, you can also market your book on Amazon and get a monthly royalty statement, check, and it looks great. I mean, it looks like any publishing house can hire somebody to create a nice cover, and off you go.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about your book. You have some lore on the seven. How many Ivy League colleges are there?
Eight. Yeah. It talks about,
is one of them
what? I'm sorry.
Is one of them Stanford, or are they all East Coast?
They're all East Coast. They're all except for Cornell. They were all before the Revolution. There are other schools that have been considered or that have petitioned, but technically it's an athletic conference of 8 New England and Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York schools.
And is this a formal organization like the Ivy League, or is it just more of a custom?
No, it's an official athletic conference like the Big Ten. They have a central office that I had to deal with to a great extent to get the information and permissions and things like that. Basically, my connection is my father had gone to Brown in Providence, which is one of the 8. Sure. And I used to go to the football games with him and his friends, and when I was very young. And the football wasn't much to watch, but I loved the mascot. They had someone in a bear suit who was just wild and uninhibited. I fell in love with it to the point that I would tell people that that's what I wanted to be when I grew up. And so, like I said, the idea stuck with me. And then when it came time to choose a book to do, obviously, because my dad had kind of inspired the process, he also inspired the idea. So, as you said, I used the internet, contacted a lot of friends and colleagues I knew who had gone to these schools, and I put together just hundreds of pages of material from which I boiled down to the information that's in the book.
Well, given the fact that we're both in Boston, let's talk a little bit about Harvard.
Yeah.
Right.
I was just there yesterday. Yeah.
I mean, you're doing you said a pop-up store there?
Yeah, I did a pop-up store yesterday, the Harvard Square Business Association. What used to be Hidden Sweets, the candy store on Battle Street, left. And so they've been having just various people come in for an hour or two to to sell things or promote things. And so they were nice enough to invite me to come by yesterday. And a lot of people came in. They were all reminiscing and sharing stories, and sold some books. And I had some food items. I also do food reviews on WBZ, as I said. So I have a lot of friends in the food business who were nice enough to donate snacks. So it was a good time. It was fun.
So what did you learn about Harvard? I mean, were there any good stories that people recounted?
Well, just I mean, the big one that everyone mentioned is the statue of the three lies, which is there's a statue of it's purported to be John Harvard in Harvard Yard, but apparently it wasn't modeled after him. And John Harvard did not officially start the school. He just donated his library to it. It was actually started by the clergy in Cambridge because it was meant to train clergy. Mm-hmm. And also the statue has the wrong date of founding, so they call it the statue of the three lies. So a lot of people knew that one, but I found some really interesting, some of the things I couldn't publish because I didn't want to embarrass any of the schools. But there was a lot of fun stories, and they seem to be, people really seem to be enjoying them.
Well, Harvard originally was, as you say, it was a Puritan Congregationalist institution to train clergy, and Boston Latin School in Boston was the feeder school. These were small institutions. Massachusetts Hall was the first building, and that's still there. In fact, I think they just finished renovating it.
Right.
And since then, of course, it's become almost like a Vatican over there.
Yeah, it's one of the largest corporations in America. It was the first chartered corporation, has the largest library, the first this, the largest that. They love all those things.
And what's going on now at Harvard? I mean, it's they had, well, I mean, back in the day, they had a long period of sort of very, I don't want to to use the term. I mean, it was very racist. I think it was Lowell who was he kept only white Protestant men, and then it opened up in the 1960s. It became more diverse. Now they have had a lawsuit by Chinese students that was saying that they were keeping out Chinese students, and they found all this stuff that didn't look particularly nice. I mean, in the course of deposition. What's it like now in terms of like the student body? I mean, who goes there? How much of a percentage of Harvard is legacy? How many people do they welcome in? And what is generally the atmosphere?
Well, I can't speak to the exact numbers. I mean, as we saw recently with the Varsity Blues case, schools do odd things to make their decisions. So, whether it's quotas, whether it's legacies, whether it's affirmative action, there's so many moving parts. If taking as a snapshot the people walking by and the students who came in yesterday, it was vastly diverse. There was a family who had just moved here from Singapore because there's a mother and her two daughters came in. Apparently, her husband and their father was given a scholarship to do a master's at Harvard Business School. Then there were some other freshmen from various parts of the Midwest. So I really met. That was one of the best parts about yesterday, is I was being kind of on the ground there and just meeting whoever dropped by. I mean, it is self-selecting, of course, but it is the crown jewel of the American education system for many different reasons, and so that that has a lot of appeal, and it was great to see those people come by.
Have they maintained their standards of excellence? Because I think that not that this in any way detracts from it, but Harvard now gives certificates, and they do this leadership conference, and it's kind of like a shortcut. It gives you the Harvard logo, and it gives you the Harvard imprimatur, if you will,
right,
without actually going. And it's probably a moneymaker for them. What's going on with that?
They're as there are with any schools. They all have institutions. They have online courses. Harvard's involved, of course, with edX, which is the online juggernaut. So there are a lot of ways to say you're affiliated with Harvard. I mean, of course, they have their medical system. So if you work anywhere at Mass General or Brigham and Women's, et cetera, you're affiliated. Mm-hmm. So there are many ways to claim an affiliation. But still, I think in terms, I mean, they still have among the lowest percentage of acceptance relative to applications for their undergraduate and graduate programs. I think I've been a teacher for 20 years. I think all schools' standards have changed in terms of what they're looking for in the student and how supportive they want to be. But I think that's really what I loved about writing this book, is just going back to the original reasons that these schools and this league were founded. Was really interesting and definitely shed a light on what they've become.
And also, Harvard is building an entirely new school in Brighton for engineering and applied science,
right?
Which I think is almost ready to be opened.
Yeah, the buildings look pretty much done. I mean, that was the old WGBH campus.
Right, and there's a huge amount of growth in that area for Harvard after a period of stalled out development. Now they're totally in. What about the secret societies?
Well,
not the Skull and Bones, but also Harvard has one of those. I mean, that's interesting.
Well, they have their dining clubs, like a lot of these schools. Some of the things I found were every school had their secret society. Most of them were all white male for quite some time. There was actually an article in Harvard Magazine this past issue about how they're finally becoming more diverse. It turns out that Saturday, I just happened to be in New Haven on the Yale campus, and we were walking around, and there was this single floor building, like a red stucco with very small windows, no markings. And I looked on the campus map, and there was a patch of grass there. There was no building. So I have a feeling it was Skull and Bones, but only
well, Skull and Bones, actually, that one has been, they have the crypt,
right? Yeah,
which is pretty famous, and it kind of became a national story, I think, in 2004, when it turned out that both George W. Bush and
right.
John Kerry had been Skull Bonesmen.
Right.
So there was all this kind of like secrets conspiracy, like that these guys rule the country and that one whatnot.
Illuminati type thing, yeah.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
It was interesting that there was not even a building on the map. It was just as if there were no building there.
No, it's interesting, and there's all the legend that they have the skull and the bones of Geronimo was in this kind of stuff, and they're involved with some pretty weird rituals. I don't know. Who knows? We can't know. It's secret, right?
Yeah. Well, apparently.
Are they really true to those secrets? I mean, is this something that's really sealed off?
Well, it seems. I remember my grandfather was a Mason, and he always told me that if he knew he were going to die, he would teach me the handshake, but not until.
Oh boy!
Unfortunately, I was not with him at the very end, so that's a secret I at least won't know from him.
Yeah, I mean, and these things do tend to become networks for people in business, and they help each other out. I mean, there's an element of fraternity to it that I suppose is only natural. And when you're dealing with the Ivy League, that's a top of the cream of the crop in terms of positions nationally. So yeah, I mean, they do have that kind of influence, I would think.
Yeah, I would think so.
And they probably interact with each other to a certain degree. Are there these groups at like William and Mary and at the other Ivy Leagues, or?
William Mary actually isn't.
It's not.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. It's just that it isn't the oldest 8 schools, which I think a lot of people think it was. Like I said, Cornell is actually younger than the country. All of the other 7 are pre-colonial, or they're called the colonial colleges. But William and Mary, Rutgers, there are actually a number of other schools that were founded before Cornell that are not included. So the most interesting thing is kind of when I contacted the schools and looked through their history, as you were mentioning before, trying to find out why they were chosen. Harvard and Yale were among the first. Penn was the first university. But a lot of them, I got a lot of different theories about why those 8 in particular. Especially, I mean, Cornell is geographically an outlier. It's not, it's up in Ithaca. Princeton is rural, but it was close to Philadelphia. So, Cornell was. I got the most interesting theories about why they were included when so many schools, like you said, Stanford, Chicago, Duke, have applied or expressed interest. I think it just was a lot of these schools had established their own athletic rivalries, and so it just kind of made sense to lump them into a division together.
I see. So it really comes down to the athletic league. That's really interesting, and I think that for secret societies, for some reason, Colgate is a big secret college, even though it's not in the Ivy League. So it's not necessarily exclusive to the Ivy League.
No, that idea of the secrets, but a lot of the, like I said, the first all male, the first all this, were at these schools, and they like to tout those statistics.
So what can you tell us in terms of like some funny stuff that you